The storm raged like the wrath of God himself, lashing across the vast prairie as Daphne Keller clung to the side of the stagecoach. Her fingers slipping on the rain-slicked wood as the driver urged the horses forward without her. She screamed until her voice gave out, but the thunder swallowed her cries as effectively as the darkness swallowed the retreating vehicle. The year was 1873, and Daphne found herself utterly alone in the unforgiving wilderness of the Wyoming Territory. "Come back!" she shouted one final time, her sodden blue dress plastered against her trembling form as lightning split the sky above. The betrayal cut deeper than the cold they had left her behind on purpose. She was certain of it. Her traveling companion, a man who had introduced himself as a respectable businessman, had convinced the driver she was a thief. It had been his word against hers, and in this part of the country, a man's word carried more weight than gold. Daphne stumbled forward, disoriented by the driving rain and howling wind. Her trunk with all her possessions was gone, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and the small pouch of coins sewn into her petticoat. At 22, she had seen her share of hardships since leaving Boston, but nothing had prepared her for this desolation. Another crack of lightning illuminated the landscape, revealing a copse of trees about half a mile distant. With no better option, Daphne gathered her sodden skirts and pushed forward, each step a battle against the mud that threatened to claim her boots. The wind shifted suddenly, driving the rain horizontally into her face with such force that she had to turn away. In that moment, she collided with something solid yet yielding something warm and alive. "Whoa there, miss!" A deep voice called over the storm's fury. Daphne screamed and stumbled backward, nearly losing her footing on the slick ground. A strong hand shot out and caught her elbow, steadying her. "Easy now," the voice continued. Lightning flashed again, revealing a tall man atop a massive chestnut horse. Water streamed from the brim of his hat as he leaned down toward her. "What in tarnation are you doing out here alone, the stagecoach?" she gasped, her teeth chattering. "They left me." "Said I stole, but I didn't. Questions can wait," the man interrupted, swinging down from his saddle with surprising grace. "You'll catch your death out here." Before Daphne could protest, the stranger shrugged out of his oilskin duster and wrapped it around her shoulders. The sudden warmth was so startling that tears sprang to her eyes. "My ranch is just over that rise," he said, pointing toward the trees she'd spotted earlier. "Can you ride?" Daphne nodded, though in truth she'd only ridden a few times in her life. The man seemed to read her hesitation. "I'll help you up and you'll ride with me," he decided, his tone brooking no argument. With strong hands at her waist, he lifted her effortlessly onto his horse before mounting behind her. One arm circled her waist, pulling her securely against his chest as he gathered the reins with his free hand. "Hold tight now," he instructed, his breath warm against her ear. As they rode through the tempest, Daphne found herself enveloped in the stranger's warmth. His chest was solid against her back, and despite her fear and the cold, she felt the first flicker of safety she'd experienced in days. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice raised to be heard over the storm. "Daphne Keller," she answered, her words whipped away by the wind. "Brady Everett," he replied. "Hold on, Miss Keller. Not much farther now." True to his word, they soon crested a small hill, and through the curtain of rain, Daphne could make out the dark shape of a ranch house, with a large barn beside it. A few lights glowed welcomingly from the windows. They rode directly to the barn, where Brady dismounted first before helping Daphne down. Her legs trembled beneath her, partly from cold and partly from the unfamiliar ride. The barn was a blessed relief from the storm, the air inside warm and heavy with the scent of hay and horses. Brady led his mount to a stall and quickly began removing the saddle. "There's a blanket on that hook," he said, nodding toward the wall. "Wrap yourself in it while I tend to Maverick here. Can't have him catching cold either." Daphne did as instructed, grateful for the dry wool blanket, though it was rough against her skin. She watched as Brady efficiently cared for his horse, his movements sure and practiced. In the lantern light, she could finally see him clearly, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly where it was wet. He couldn't have been more than 30, with a face weathered by sun and wind, but handsome in a rugged way. "Thank you," she said when he finally turned his attention back to her. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Brady's expression was grim. "Nothing good, that's certain." He studied her for a moment. "You're soaked through. We need to get you to the house and into dry clothes before you take ill." They dashed through the rain to the main house, Brady keeping a steadying hand at her elbow. Inside, the warmth enveloped Daphne like an embrace. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, and simple but sturdy furniture filled the main room. "Wait here," Brady instructed, disappearing down a hallway only to return moments later with a bundle of clothing. "These belong to my sister. She's gone now, married a man from Colorado and moved west last year. They should fit well enough." "I couldn't possibly," Daphne began. "You can and you will," Brady cut her off, though not unkindly. "You need dry clothes and Beth's have just been gathering dust." He pointed to a door. "You can change in there. I'll make some coffee to warm you up." Alone in what appeared to be a small bedroom, Daphne peeled off her sodden garments with shaking fingers. The clothes Brady had provided were simple, but well made: a long cotton skirt, a white blouse, and even clean undergarments wrapped discreetly in a handkerchief. The fact that he'd thought to include such necessities spoke of a man raised with women in the household. When she emerged, Brady was standing at a cast-iron stove, pouring steaming liquid into 2 mugs. He glanced up and something flickered in his eyes before he quickly looked away. "Better?" he asked, handing her a mug. "Much, thank you." Daphne accepted the coffee gratefully, cradling it between her palms to absorb its warmth. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." Brady gestured toward a chair by the fire. "Sit. Warm yourself properly." Once she was seated, he took the chair opposite her. "Now, tell me how you came to be alone in the middle of nowhere during the worst storm we've had all year." Daphne sipped her coffee, gathering her thoughts. "I was traveling to Laramie to take a position as a schoolteacher. The town council wrote that they were desperate for someone with proper education. That's a good 50 miles from here," Brady noted with a frown. "Yes. I was traveling with a man named Harrison Wells. He seemed respectable enough, claimed to be a businessman headed to the same town." Daphne's hands tightened around her mug. "This afternoon, while we stopped to change horses, I noticed him going through my trunk. When I confronted him, he accused me of stealing his watch. He must have planted it among my things because the driver found it there." Her voice cracked. "They wouldn't listen to me. They threw me out and left me there." Brady's expression darkened. "Wells, you say? Short man, fancy clothes, wears a gold ring with a red stone." Daphne looked up sharply. "You know him?" "Know of him," Brady corrected. "He's no businessman. He's a confidence man who preys on travelers, especially women traveling alone. The watch was likely a ploy to get rid of you so he could make off with your belongings." The confirmation of her suspicions did little to comfort Daphne. "Everything I own was in that trunk. My teaching credentials, my clothes, my mother's locket." She fought back tears. "The storm's keeping them from getting far," Brady said thoughtfully. "Once it passes, I could ride after them." "No," Daphne said firmly. "I won't have you risking yourself for my possessions. You've done more than enough already." Brady studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. "What will you do now?" It was a question Daphne had been avoiding. Without her credentials, would the town council in Laramie still accept her? Without her belongings, how would she establish herself? The future that had seemed so certain just hours ago now stretched before her like an uncharted wilderness. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have a little money sewn into my petticoat. Perhaps enough to replace some necessities and continue to Laramie." Brady nodded slowly. "You're welcome to stay here until you figure things out. I've got the space, and it wouldn't be proper to send you off alone again." "I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition," he interrupted. "Ranch is too quiet these days anyway. My foreman, Hank, lives in the bunkhouse with the other hands, but they keep to themselves mostly." The generosity of this stranger continued to astonish Daphne. "Why are you helping me like this?" Brady's gaze shifted to the fire. "Out here, people have to look out for each other. The land's unforgiving enough without humans adding to the cruelty." He stood abruptly. "You must be hungry. Let me fix you something to eat." As Brady moved about the kitchen, Daphne observed him surreptitiously. There was an efficiency to his movements that spoke of a man accustomed to caring for himself, yet a gentleness that hinted at deeper qualities. The meal he prepared was simple beans, bacon, and biscuits that he admitted were left over from morning, but to Daphne's empty stomach, it was a feast. They ate in companionable silence, the storm continuing its assault outside. "The guest room is yours for as long as you need it," Brady said when they had finished. "It's where you changed earlier. There are extra blankets in the chest if you get cold." "Thank you," Daphne said, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events and her own exhaustion. "For everything." Brady merely nodded, but as Daphne rose to retire, he spoke again. "Miss Keller," she turned back to him. "Stay with me," he said softly. Then, perhaps realizing how his words might be interpreted, he quickly added, "On the ranch, I mean. At least until we can sort out your situation. It's not safe for a woman alone out here." The sincerity in his eyes moved her deeply. "I will, thank you, Mr. Everett." "Brady," he corrected with the faintest smile. "If you're staying, you might as well use my given name." "Brady," she repeated, finding she liked the feel of it on her tongue. "Good night." "Good night, Daphne," he replied. And the sound of her name in his deep voice followed her into dreams that, for the first time in many nights, were not haunted by fear. Morning brought sunshine streaming through the small window of the guest room, and for a moment, Daphne was disoriented. The events of the previous night came rushing back, and she sat up quickly, half expecting to find herself still in the storm. Instead, the room was warm and bright, the borrowed clothes still draped over a chair where she'd left them. A soft knock at the door startled her. "Miss Keller." "Daphne." Brady's voice was muffled by the wood. "There's breakfast if you're hungry." "I'll be right out," she called back, hastily dressing in Beth Everett's clothes, which fit her reasonably well, though the skirt was a bit short, revealing more of her ankles than was strictly proper. In the kitchen, Brady was setting a platter of eggs and salt pork on the table. He glanced up as she entered, and something in his expression made her self-conscious. "I hope I'm not too much of a fright," she said, smoothing her hair, which she'd hastily pinned up. "Not at all," Brady replied quickly. "You look well-rested." Daphne smiled despite herself. "I am, thank you. Your hospitality has been extraordinary." Brady shrugged off the compliment. "Sit, eat while it's hot. We've got things to discuss." Over breakfast, Brady laid out a plan. "I sent one of my hands, Tommy, to follow the stagecoach trail. With any luck, he'll catch up to them and recover your belongings." "You didn't have to do that," Daphne protested. "Maybe not, but I did." Brady's tone was matter of fact. "In the meantime, I thought you might want to see the ranch." "Unless you'd prefer to rest today." The idea of staying cooped up indoors after her ordeal held no appeal. I'd like to see the ranch very much. Brady's face lit up with a smile that transformed his features, making him appear younger and more carefree. Good. I'll saddle a gentle mare for you. An hour later, Daphne found herself atop a placid chestnut mare named Daisy, following Brady as he showed her his land. The Everett Ranch, she learned, encompassed nearly 2,000 acres of rolling prairie and woodland, with a creek running through the eastern portion. My father started with nothing but 100 acres and a dream, Brady explained as they rode side by side. By the time he passed 5 years ago, he'd built one of the most respected cattle operations in the territory. And now it's yours, Daphne observed. A shadow crossed Brady's face. Mine to maintain, to honor his legacy. Is that what you want? The question slipped out before Daphne could consider its propriety. Brady seemed surprised by her directness but not offended. It's what I know, what I'm good at. He paused, considering. Though sometimes I wonder what it might be like to do something else, be someone else. Like what? He chuckled, seemingly embarrassed. You'll think it foolish. I promise I won't, Daphne assured him. I've always had a fondness for books, history mostly. The stories of how things came to be, he glanced at her. Not very cowboy-like, I know. On the contrary, I think it's wonderful, Daphne said sincerely. Knowledge is never wasted, no matter one's profession. Brady studied her for a moment as if seeing her in a new light. Your students in Laramie would have been fortunate to have you as their teacher. The compliment warmed Daphne more than seemed reasonable. They still might if your man Tommy is successful. Even if he isn't, Brady said thoughtfully, I'm sure arrangements could be made. Letters written to verify your credentials. Perhaps, Daphne agreed, though the prospect of continuing to Laramie no longer held the same appeal it had just days ago. They rode in companionable silence for a while, cresting a hill that offered a panoramic view of the ranch. In the distance, cowboys moved among the cattle, tiny figures against the vast landscape. It's beautiful, Daphne breathed. It is, Brady agreed, though when she glanced at him, he was looking not at the view but at her. The days that followed fell into a comfortable routine. Daphne, determined not to be an idle guest, insisted on helping with household tasks. She discovered that Brady, despite living alone, maintained an impressively orderly home, though certain touches like curtains or decorative items were noticeably absent. My sister took most of the pretty things, as she called them, when she left, Brady explained when Daphne commented on it. Said I wouldn't appreciate them anyway. And would you? Daphne asked teasingly. Brady considered the question seriously. I might not have noticed them much before, but the place does feel emptier without them. On the fourth day, Tommy returned, his expression grim. Caught up to the stage in Rockton, he reported, but the fella you described was long gone. Took off with a lady's trunk, according to the station master. I'm sorry, Miss Keller. Daphne had prepared herself for this news, but it still stung. Thank you for trying, Tommy. I appreciate your efforts. After Tommy left, Brady found Daphne sitting on the porch, staring out at the horizon. I'm sorry, he said, settling into the chair beside her. It's not your fault, she replied. In fact, you've done more for me than anyone had any right to expect. What will you do now? It was the question that had been haunting her. I should continue to Laramie as planned. The town is expecting a teacher, and credentials or not, I am qualified. Brady nodded slowly. I could take you there myself. Make sure you arrive safely. The offer was generous, yet Daphne felt a strange reluctance at the thought of leaving. In just a few days, the ranch had begun to feel like a home, and Brady had become someone she looked forward to seeing each morning. There's no rush, Brady added when she didn't immediately respond. The offer to stay stands for as long as you need. Why? Daphne asked suddenly. Why are you being so kind to me? Brady seemed taken aback by the directness of her question. He was silent for so long that Daphne thought he might not answer. When I found you in that storm, he finally said, his voice low, you looked at me with such hope, such trust. Like I was sent there specifically to help you. He met her gaze directly. No one has ever looked at me that way before, like I mattered that much. The raw honesty in his admission touched something deep within Daphne. You did matter. You saved my life. Maybe, Brady conceded. Or maybe you saved something in me. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Then Brady stood abruptly. I should check on the herd. The new calves are due soon. Daphne watched him go, her heart beating a rapid tattoo against her ribs. It was foolish, she knew, to develop feelings for a man she'd known less than a week. Yet there was something about Brady Everett that called to her soul. That evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Daphne broached a subject that had been on her mind. I've been thinking about how I might repay your kindness. Brady looked up from the book he'd been reading. That's not necessary. Nevertheless, Daphne persisted. I noticed your bookshelf is quite extensive but somewhat disorganized. I thought I might catalog it properly for you, perhaps create a system so you can find what you're looking for more easily. A slow smile spread across Brady's face. You do that. It would be my pleasure, Daphne assured him. And perhaps while I'm here, I could teach you other things as well. If you're interested in history, I could show you how different events connect, how to see the patterns. I'd like that very much, Brady said softly. The following days took on new meaning as Daphne began organizing Brady's extensive library. She discovered volumes of history, philosophy, and literature that would have been impressive in a city home, let alone a ranch in the Wyoming Territory. My father believed education was important, Brady explained when she commented on the collection. He couldn't read himself, never had the chance to learn, but he made sure I did. Brought books back from every cattle drive to Denver or Kansas City. He sounds like a remarkable man, Daphne said. He was, Brady agreed, a note of melancholy in his voice. I hope I'm doing right by him. I'm sure you are, Daphne assured him, impulsively placing her hand over his. The contact sent a jolt through her, and from Brady's startled expression, he felt it too. Their evening lessons became the highlight of each day. Daphne discovered that Brady was a quick study with a natural curiosity that made teaching him a joy. For his part, Brady seemed to delight in her enthusiasm, often asking questions that led to discussions lasting well into the night. 2 weeks after her arrival, Daphne realized with a start that she had not thought about continuing to Laramie in days. The ranch had become more than a temporary shelter. It had become a place where she felt truly alive. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. What did it mean for her future? For her relationship with Brady? That same evening, Brady returned from town with a letter. It's for you, he said, handing her the envelope. From the town council in Laramie. Daphne stared at the letter, her heart pounding. How? I wrote to them, Brady admitted. Explained your situation. Asked if the position was still available. With trembling fingers, Daphne opened the letter and read its contents. The council expressed sympathy for her misfortune and assured her that the teaching position remained open, should she still wish to fill it. They requested her arrival within the month. Thank you, she said when she finished reading. This was incredibly thoughtful. Brady nodded, his expression unreadable. I thought you'd want to know your options. Yes, of course. Daphne folded the letter carefully. I should give them my answer soon. What will you tell them? Brady's voice was carefully neutral. Daphne looked up at him, searching his face for some indication of what he wanted her to say. I'm not sure yet. That night, sleep eluded Daphne. The teaching position in Laramie represented the independence she had sought when leaving Boston. It was a respectable profession for a woman alone, a chance to build a life on her own terms. Yet the thought of leaving the ranch, of leaving Brady, filled her with a profound sadness. In the short time she'd known him, he had become more important to her than she could have imagined possible. His quiet strength, his unexpected vulnerability, his respect for her mind and opinions, all of these had woven themselves into the fabric of her heart. Morning found her still undecided. She dressed in one of the dresses Brady had purchased for her in town, a simple blue calico that suited her far better than his sister's clothes had, and went to help with breakfast, as had become their custom. The kitchen was empty, but a note on the table informed her that Brady had ridden out early to check on a heifer that was having trouble calving. He would return by midday. Restless, Daphne decided to walk to the creek. The spring weather was mild, with wildflowers beginning to dot the prairie. At the creek, she sat on a flat rock, watching the water flow and trying to bring clarity to her thoughts. The sound of hoofbeats alerted her to Brady's approach before she saw him. He dismounted gracefully and tied his horse to a nearby tree before joining her on the rock. "Successful?" she asked. "Twin calves," he confirmed with a smile. "Both healthy, though the mother was a bit surprised by the second one." "As most mothers would be, I imagine," Daphne said, returning his smile. They sat in silence for a moment, the babbling of the creek filling the space between them. "Have you decided?" Brady finally asked, not looking at her. "About Laramie," Daphne took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about it all night. The position is everything I came west for, independence, purpose, a chance to use my education." Brady nodded, his jaw tight. "It's a good opportunity." "It is," Daphne agreed, "but I've realized something these past weeks." She turned to face him fully. "Independence isn't worth much if you're alone." Brady's head snapped up, his eyes searching hers. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've found something here that I wasn't looking for, but now can't imagine living without." Daphne's heart pounded as she forced herself to continue. "I've found you, Brady, and if you want me to stay, truly want me to stay, then Laramie can find another teacher." For a moment, Brady was utterly still, his expression frozen somewhere between disbelief and hope. Then, in a movement so swift it startled her, he took her hands in his. "I want you to stay," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "God help me. I've wanted to ask you since the day after you arrived, but I couldn't bear the thought of you staying out of gratitude or obligation." "It's neither of those things," Daphne assured him, squeezing his hands. "It's because in all my life, I've never felt as understood, as valued, as I do when I'm with you." Brady released one of her hands to touch her cheek gently. "When I found you in that storm, I thought I was rescuing you. I never imagined you'd end up rescuing me from a loneliness I'd grown so accustomed to I hardly recognized it anymore." His words resonated deeply within Daphne. "Perhaps we rescued each other." Brady smiled, the expression transforming his face. "Perhaps we did." Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward. When his lips met hers, Daphne felt as though the world around them had fallen away, leaving only this moment, this connection. The kiss was gentle at first, a question being asked and answered. Then, as Daphne's arms wound around Brady's neck, it deepened into something more powerful, a promise being made. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Brady rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he whispered, echoing his words from that stormy night. "Not just for now, but for always." "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" Daphne's voice trembled with emotion. Brady pulled back slightly, his expression serious. "I know it's fast. Some might say too fast. But out here, life teaches you not to waste time when you find something precious." He took her hands again. "I love you, Daphne Keller. I think I started falling in love with you that first night when you were soaking wet and still had the spirit to stand up to a strange cowboy." A laugh bubbled up from Daphne's chest, even as tears filled her eyes. "And I love you, Brady Everett. Against all reason and propriety, I do." "Then marry me," Brady said simply. "Be my wife, my partner in everything. Help me make this ranch not just a business but a home." The answer rose to Daphne's lips without hesitation. "Yes." Brady's whoop of joy startled birds from nearby trees as he lifted her off the ground, spinning her in a circle that left them both dizzy and laughing. "When?" he asked, when he finally set her down. "As soon as possible," Daphne replied with newfound certainty. "I've waited long enough to find where I belong." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in town, with Brady's ranch hands and a few neighbors as witnesses. Daphne wore a cream-colored dress that Brady had insisted on ordering from Denver, claiming his bride deserved the finest he could provide. As they exchanged vows, Daphne marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. What had begun as a terrifying abandonment had led to the greatest happiness she had ever known. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared. "You may kiss your bride." As Brady's lips met hers, sealing their union, Daphne knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the most unexpected storms could lead to the clearest skies. 5 years later, the Everett Ranch had flourished under their joint care. Brady's business acumen combined with Daphne's organizational skills had expanded their operations, making the ranch one of the most prosperous in the territory. But more importantly, they had built a true home. The house now boasted curtains and pretty things, as Brady still called them, along with a nursery for their 3-year-old daughter, Emma, and their infant son, James. The library had expanded too, with Daphne's books joining Brady's in neat, cataloged rows. And 3 times a week, children from neighboring ranches gathered in a small schoolhouse Brady had built on their property, where Daphne taught reading, writing, and history to eager young minds. On the anniversary of the storm that had brought them together, Brady and Daphne always rode to the creek, their special place. This year, with Emma old enough to sit securely in front of her father on his horse, they made it a family outing. As they picnicked on the bank, Emma chasing butterflies while baby James slept in a basket beside them, Brady took Daphne's hand. "You ever wonder what would have happened if that stage hadn't left you behind?" he asked. Daphne considered the question. "Sometimes. I might have reached Laramie as planned, become the town school teacher, lived a perfectly respectable life. Do you ever regret that it didn't happen that way?" Daphne looked at their daughter, her dark curls bouncing as she ran, at their son sleeping peacefully, and finally at her husband, whose eyes still held the same warmth they had when he'd found her in the storm. "Not for a single moment," she said with absolute conviction. "Some storms are meant to wash away the old path, so you can find the one you were truly meant to follow." Brady smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of his eyes in a way that still made Daphne's heart skip. "You always did have a way with words, Mrs. Everett. And you always had a way of making me feel safe, Mr. Everett," she returned, leaning into his embrace. "Even in the darkest storm." As the creek bubbled beside them and their children thrived in the sunshine, Daphne reflected that sometimes being abandoned in a thunderstorm could be the beginning of the most beautiful journey of all.